Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. Orbiting this at a distance of roughly 92 million miles is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet whose ape-descended life forms are so amazingly primitive that two of them think doing a podcast called Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea is a pretty neat idea. They are Jeff and Brian. Hi there, this is Jeff. I'm with my friend Brian, and this is our bonus episode. Hey Jeff, Brian, how are you doing today?
Wait,
how do we start if it's the second bonus episode? Why don't we just forget all that and go right to the comic book?
So here we are looking at the comic book.
So, Brian, we've made it to the third issue of the Restaurant at the End of the Universe comic book.
Yes, deja vu all over again.
Yes, the trilogy of the second.
Yes, there you go. 6 books of the first 2.
Right. And this cover has a giant bathtub, a frightening looking rubber duck, a comical looking kilozap gun, and Ford and Arthur are a little bit worried about the comical kilozap gun because of the look on the face of, would that be number 2?
Number two, yes, and he is quite well dressed in his armament.
Yes.
Looking kind of like a cross between a majorette
yes.
and an officer.
Right.
I think it's the epaulets that make it funny to me. They look more like a mop than a...
Yes, they do. What about the whistle hanging from his belt, or one of the belts?
Yes. He's got many belts.
I'm surprised there isn't a number 2 on him, because they've been going out of their way to put that kind of designations when it's needed.
And of course we got Ford and Arthur on the cover here again, with Ford with his pointy ears, kind of looking like an imp again.
Yes.
The cover, the title part of the page is similar to the first 2 books in this second series.
Yep.
Although the Earth is in the background here, where it's interesting that the perspective is of North America.
Yes, it is this time. Well, remember, it was an American publication.
It was. Well, actually, Canadian, right? Canadian, I think, is what it was.
It was printed in Canada, but I believe...
Right. Inked in the
DC
U.S.?
DC Comics is from the U.S.
Right. And they don't even land in North America, of course. Well, anyway, that's getting ahead of the story.
No.
As if we haven't already been there, right?
But isn't this 2 million years ago?
It is.
And all of the continents seem to be in exactly the same place.
Wouldn't
they be squished in a little bit, closer to becoming the Pangea that it started at?
In 2 million years prior? I'm not sure how long it's taken the Earth to expand from Pangea. Good question.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that they weren't there.
Well, it certainly is a puzzlement, sir. Right. A puzzlement, I say.
Well, before we get into the meat of the issue, I'm going to show 2 very boring trading cards.
Oh,
and this
really?
is just so you can see the list of all of the cards that were in the set. They are
excellent.
The checklist.
I like that.
So the first checklist is card number 53. And in the list of cards, it only goes to 52. So the card number 53 does not make the checklist.
Oh, there you go. Somebody has an oversight there, huh?
And if you look at the next checklist, it starts at 54, and it goes to 99, and the checklist is card 100. So they didn't put the checklist cards on the checklist of cards.
Which they usually actually do in these kind of sets. They usually try to include all of the cards.
Yes.
Because to be a completist, you would need all of those cards.
Many card checklists that I have checklist listed as the last card of the set. So I just thought that was pretty funny that they left the checklist cards off the checklist. Once again, start with a copyright page, same as all the other books, and I'm sure the next 3 will have the same thing. Then we get to the creators. Nobody is different here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to a full page of Looney Tunes.
Oh, yeah. The circles of Looney Tunes.
Yes, the circle of Looney Tunes with Ford and Arthur running in the middle.
In a sketch form.
Right.
Yep. And it's so funny how Ford seems to get younger and younger.
Yes.
Here he looks like he's 13 years old or something.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
And now, rather than imitating Star Trek, they kind of do Star Wars.
The Star Wars page. Oh my gosh.
But it's not perspective, it's only conical.
Exactly. An attempt at, I don't know. Let's just skip that.
Okay. It starts out with yet another introduction.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure there's much that I would repeat from that particular story.
No, but
again, words I haven't heard from Douglas Adams before, but certainly a lamenting tone to it.
Yes. Basically, what I think I can relate to is that they want him to write an introduction to a work that he's done 13 years ago. Mm-hmm. And of course, they're like, it'll just take you 2 minutes. It'll just take you 2 minutes. And he's like, 2 minutes, it's going to take 13 hours. It's like, he can't just sit down and write out this little thing.
Right.
He puts effort into it. So what they think just takes 2 minutes takes 13 hours. And I'm wondering if that's what some of my friends and family feel when I'm asking them to do introductions and commercial recordings, and I'm saying, it's just going to take 2 minutes. It's just going to take 2 minutes.
Well, I don't know.
I hope nobody has spent 13 hours doing a recording.
I think they worry too much about the recording. They should just do like we do, and cheat.
Yes. Editing is your friend.
That's right.
So now we get to the first page of the story, and it's kind of reminding us where we were. Hot Black Desiato stunt ship is about to crash into the sun with all of our heroes on board.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we forgot who they were, they got 2 different pictures of Zaphod, each of his heads, but you can see the other head in the background, so I kind of find that funny.
Yeah, and what's funny is that they go from the left head to the right head, and the left head has the similar expression that the right head has.
Yes.
And but in each of the frames, the left head is doing something different than the right head. Oh, I'm confused.
Yeah. And again,
gosh.
Ford looks very young.
Mm-hmm.
Arthur looks very confused and scared.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Trillian has crazy eyes. And Arthur's saying, so this is it. We're going to die.
And then they repeat Ford's theories about Earthlings and why they repeat the very, very obvious.
Yes. And then the guide talks about it.
Right, and here the guide's talking also about the Cacrophonians, right?
Yes, the ones with the telepathy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as punishment is how they got telepathy.
Right. One of the gentlemen is reading Quantum Physics and Interior Design. What a good combination, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it's kind of a neat picture, kind of a full page overview from above of some sort of gathering space with fountains and walkways and tables.
Yep.
Next.
More Cacophonians all trying to distract each other with gibberish about the weather.
Yes, because if they kept talking, then you couldn't read their mind.
Mm-hmm. So that's why they decide to invite Disaster Area to play a concert on their planet.
Correct. And back on the ship.
And each time we get to this particular ship, it looks smaller and smaller, doesn't it?
Yeah. They refer to our group as the reluctant concert goers.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
And they're looking for escape capsules, but there aren't any. And Zaphod called for help, and they said it was a great honor to meet him.
Looks like Zaphod's trying to pull on some wires to get things to change up a little bit, and then Arthur turns to the group and said, incidentally, what does teleport mean?
And they're all kind of stunned looking at him.
Then they all go rushing towards the teleport, and they see the out of order sign.
Yes. And Ford's looking at it, and he's determining that it is in working order, but you just can't program where you're going to go, and it has to be operated manually.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody has to stay behind to operate it and crash into the sun with the ship.
And then our friend Marvin, who's dejectedly sitting in a corner, gets approached with, "Hey, Marvin, my old pal, how you doing?" And Marvin responds, "Very badly, I suspect."
Didn't realize a robot made of metal could actually slump and round its back. Oh, and here's the sun surfers. Remember you were talking about those in that other one?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, they look like they're out of control, man.
Yeah, they're just falling off or hanging onto the mast of the sail for dear life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It shows what the impact is going to be on Cacophon as the sun explodes.
And those very few who witnessed the event and survived swear that the whole 100,000 square miles of desert flipped in the air like a pancake, just as the radiation from the solar flares filtered through the water vapor and struck the new land.
And it says, 100 years later, and the atmosphere around the planet had subtly changed, and the sun blazed less harshly in the summer, and the cold felt less bitter in the winter. Pleasant rain fell more often.
Yes, so the desert world of Cacophon became a paradise, and all the environmentalists were trying to stop the concert. But they were shot, remember?
That's right.
See issue 2.
Oh my goodness.
However, a few skeptical scientists who examined the records more closely discovered faint vestiges of a vast artificially induced improbability field drifting from a nearby region of space. So it might not.
Right. Here they show the heart of gold floating about, but what's weird is there's like tentacles in the air, like sliced up tentacles.
Yes.
And perhaps that's a bowl of petunias.
Yes, that poor Agrajag, he just everywhere he goes, he gets thrown out of the heart of gold.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
And so Arthur and Ford are in this tube, it looks like.
Right.
And there's a bunch of thumping.
They're a little bit nervous. They realize, of course, they're in some kind of a spaceship. They don't know where Trillian or Zaphod are.
And they can't tell where the thumping is coming from, so they try and duck down a hallway, but it keeps coming from everywhere they go.
And this is great, because now you see a whole herd of
Our herd is
joggers
right.
thundering down the hallway, artfully dressed in their sweatsuits.
Yes.
Which is that's the costume I wore to the fan expo.
Absolutely. And it was gray, too.
I know.
So...
It actually looks very similar to what I was wearing. But unfortunately, it looked like the average Joe on the street, too.
Right.
Not the kind of cosplay that really stands out in a group.
No.
Oh, my goodness. And, of course, Arthur and Ford are kind of falling over in a heap, trying to avoid the crowd of stampeding people.
Right. Arthur goes, joggers?
Joggers. Oh, my gosh.
And then Ford looks into another room and is like, wow, this is wild.
Then they start examining the area.
And they think it's a bunch of dead people in sarcophagus.
Arthur sees a dead telephone sanitizer.
And here they keep one of the jokes.
Yeah.
The whole entire joke. The Gulga Frincham Arc Fleet Ship B Hold 7 Telephone Sanitizer 2nd Class. And a serial number. He says, a dead phone sanitizer? And Ford says, best kind. So...
And they find dead hairdressers and dead secondhand car salesmen and account executives.
Yes. And they're kind of walking through the hold and looking at everything. And there seems to be... Oh, I see. These are the rows because the ship must be curved.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just row upon row of all of these dead people who have their job attached to them.
Then they hear, turn around slowly and put your hands up. Any other moves and I blast you to bits.
And Arthur again says one of my favorite lines, which is, why isn't anyone ever pleased to see us?
And how many times have I asked you that?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Of course, they're intercepted by number 2.
Right.
Who takes control of them.
And a whole another herd of joggers comes and gets into their...
sleep pods.
Sleep pods.
No, it's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's...
Number 2 is shown with his blaster pointing straight at us. And Ford and Arthur are doing something like a duck walk, I guess, with their hands behind their head, squatting down on the ground, walking in front of him.
Yes. That would be a difficult position to run in. So they're...
Oh my gosh. And of course, we're introduced to the captain.
Who's on a pedestal in his bath.
Mm-hmm. It's not nearly as ornate as is described in the book. It's a simple clawfoot tub.
No, this is very plain.
Mm-hmm.
Plain white, smooth sides.
With a shower head. And number 2 stands erect at position and introduces his prisoners.
And they just say hello, and Captain apologizes for not getting up and asks if they want gin and tonics.
Right, and at least here they also did another nod to the book, where it's JYNNYX. Is that right?
JYNNAN for ginin.
Ginin.
And TONNYX
for tonics.
For tonics.
I love it. Gin and tonics.
Number 2 wants to interrogate the prisoners so he can get information out of them to find out why they came here.
The captain reluctantly agrees to have him go about his business and interrogate them and asks them if they want a drink.
And again, he goes overboard. All right, you scum. You vermin. What do you want to drink?
Gin and tonic sounds nice to me.
With or without ice?
Oh, yes, please. And some of those cheesy little biscuits.
I'm asking the questions. So I like that they kept that whole bit in here.
Yes, me too.
That's perfect.
Me too. Okay, so here we are with the captain in the bathtub, and the captain promptly says, number 2, why don't you push off?
Yes.
And then number 2 says, you've been soaking in that tub for 3 years now.
He reminds him that you need to relax a lot in a job like his. Ford wants to know what his job actually is.
Right. I love this scene, though, because unlike what they describe in the book and in the radio show, he's literally sitting on what looks like, I don't know, an upside-down wash tub.
Yep.
And on top of the wash tub is a clawfoot bathtub.
Yes.
Nothing like the elegant marble monstrosity that they depict in the book.
No. Remember, like you keep saying, fewer lines.
Right. Oh, he does look like the captain from Gilligan's Island, though.
Yes, he does. The skipper.
Skipper. Yes, you're right. The skipper.
So here Ford says he couldn't help noticing the bodies in the hold.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, bodies? And he's like, yeah, down in the hold. And he's saying that they're not dead. They're frozen. And Ford should know they're not dead because 3 pages ago, unlike what they've detailed in any of the books or whatever,
right,
there's a scene where all the joggers are coming back and climbing into their cryopods right in front of them.
That's correct.
So he got to see all these joggers climb back into the hold. So why he didn't quite understand that they weren't dead, even though he doesn't say dead, he just says bodies. Right.
But you are right. That is a discontinuity here. And the other interesting thing is in this bottom panel, they have what looks like a sweeping panel of monitors and stations and stuff, and a whole bunch of people that are manning them.
Mm-hmm.
Which is quite unlike what we expect, which is an automatic ship going exactly where they want it to go so that it'll crash or land into a planet.
Correct.
No monitoring involved.
Yeah, what are they doing and monitoring?
Yes.
Maybe they're playing games.
Mm-hmm, there you go.
That's the arcade.
I gotcha. Oh, my favorite arcades surround a bathtub.
Yes. Not touching that one.
Oh my gosh. And on we go.
Previously, Arthur had asked if they had a hold full of frozen hairdressers and wants to know how they're going to colonize a planet with that bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
And he explains it's a bee arc.
Right. And then he says, so what everybody thought was, let's pack the whole population into giant spaceships and go and settle another planet. And man, does he look like the skipper in that picture down the bottom?
Yes. Yeah, the bottom left.
Uh-huh. Oh my gosh.
In the middle of his story about the bee arc and where they're going and why they're going, he must know it's ridiculous because he's like, am I boring you? And Ford's like, no, this is so fascinating. So he explains that there's an A arc with all the brilliant leaders and scientists and artists, all the achievers. And in the C ship is all the people who did the actual work and built things. And then the B ship, that's them, would go all the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And they were sent off first. Arthur wants to know what exactly is wrong with the planet that they had to abandon it.
And the captain says apparently they were going to crash into the sun. And then his assistant says, I thought we were going to be invaded by a gigantic swarm of 12-foot high piranha bees.
The enormous mutant star goat. A monster from the pit of hell with scything teeth 10,000 miles long and breath that could boil away oceans.
Claws that could tear continents apart. Slavering jaws 1,000,000 miles across.
So that's a big mutant star goat.
Oh, and then Ford says the other ships were supposed to follow you. And did they?
And Captain's saying, well, it's funny you should say that, because curiously enough, we haven't heard a peep out of them since we left 5 years ago. But they must be behind us somewhere.
And I just love this picture. We talked about the degradation of the comic book here, but if you look at the captain in that final panel on the bottom, he looks like a baby. He's got just like 2 little eyes, a nose, and a mouth.
Yes. Yeah,
that's funny.
There's no detail in the faraway people. And of course, now that the captain's come to tell the story, it does seem a little odd.
Oh my goodness. And then of course Ford and Arthur ask if they could just be dropped off on the nearest planet.
He explains that would be difficult because their trajectory thingy was preset before they left Golga Frincham.
Mm-hmm. And then he explains we're not actually going to land, but in fact we're going to crash.
It's all part of the plan, I think. There was a terribly good reason for it, which I can't quite remember.
And then Ford blurts out, "You're a bunch of useless bloody lunatics."
The captain says, "Oh yes, that was the reason. We're a bunch of useless bloody loonies."
And so...
Oh, there's the ship crashed in the bog.
I love this shot. They got the ship sinking in the bog, and Ford and Arthur are off on a rock, and they're watching the people climb out of the mud.
If the ship is being swallowed totally.
The guy with the video camera clearly documenting the event.
Covered in mud. The camera is covered in mud. I can't believe it's working.
And then the next bottom panel, he says, "That's it, lovely. You're making history."
And whoever he's filming is going, "Arr." It's like Swamp Thing.
Oh, I love it.
Then Ford says that doesn't know about Arthur, but he's off. And Arthur's going, "When you say off, what exactly do you mean?" And Ford is talking about not getting any reception on any of his devices because he should be getting something. He's like, "Arthur, are you listening to me?"
What? I'm looking ahead and I'm thinking to myself, am I listening to him? Oh.
Until we pick up anything on this machine, our chances of getting off this planet are 0. It may be some freak standing wave effect in the planet's magnetic field. We can travel around until we find clear reception. Are you coming? And then they show the videographer take a dive under the mud.
Right. In the previous 2 panels, they show what looks like a viewfinder, I guess, that have zoomed in on Ford and Arthur.
Yeah, he's recording us for posterity.
Right, and then he goes sinking into the mud. Then, elsewhere in the universe, we see our favorite flying shoe.
Yep.
Silhouettes of Trillian and Zaphod, all in pink.
Yep, dancing. Or no, they're not dancing. They're just materializing back on the Heart of Gold.
Oh, correct. That's exactly what's happening. And then we see Zarniwoop sitting with his briefcase. And I'd forgotten what he looked like.
Yeah.
And he says, "Welcome back to the Heart of Gold. I trust you've had a good meal."
He's like, "Zarniwoop."
And then Zarniwoop says, "I programmed the computer with the improbability coordinates pertaining to our journey. We will arrive there very shortly. Meanwhile, relax. Prepare yourself for the meeting."
And Ford just wants to know that when this is all done, he's free to go and do whatever the hell he likes and lie on a beach and stuff.
Trillian says, "Zaphod, who is this man and why is he on our ship?" Zaphod says, "He's a very stupid man who wants to meet the man who rules the universe." Trillian says, "Ah, a social climber."
Yes, that's Zaphod. It's all about the connections.
And next we go to a pink page. The memories of the book.
Yes, and this is all explaining the major problems with governing people. Is that of whom you get to do it, or rather, of who manages to get people to let them do it to them. Which is the greatest phrasing of an election ever.
And of course we have our favorite little jab here. There's a picture of what presumably is Ronald Reagan.
Yes, yeah.
With a cowboy hat and the American flag flying behind it, with security personnel snuck in behind him.
Yes.
And then below that there's an alien creature who looks like Fidel Castro.
Yeah. Well, he's got a hat that looks like Fidel Castro's hat. The creature in no way resembles Fidel Castro.
Oh, we don't want to insult the Cuban folk.
No.
And then a couple of android monster types behind him with very large guns.
Some more security. And then the bottom panel has Zaphod, and instead of security, he's got a girl under each arm.
And a different bandana on each head.
Yes. And then they show a rainy day in a desolate area on an obscure world somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
In a tiny little shack. Not much bigger than what looks like an outhouse.
Pretty much, yes. Even got a vent like an outhouse on top, too.
Yep. Gentleman is there, noticing that it's raining, and then he's talking to his kitty cat.
Yes, asking him about a nice piece of fish.
Oh.
And he's worried that his cat's going to waste away if he doesn't eat the fish.
At least that's what he imagines will happen.
Yeah, how can he tell?
Oh, yes. This is the beginning of your very frustrating conversation, right?
It is as frustrating as it is brilliant.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So I wonder how much they're going to have in there. Seems like they're going to have most of his conversation with himself.
Yes.
Talking about all of his imaginings.
Mm-hmm. And then he starts doodling around and playing with a pencil.
Trying to figure out how to write on the paper.
Right. And talking about the different ships that he saw, or sees.
And the people there come and bring the catfish and ask him questions.
Then he's asking the cat whether he thinks the people came today.
And if he hears their voices, and does the cat think that they're just singing songs to him?
And then he goes on to say that there's cigarettes and whiskey and fish and a memory in my mind. Hardly conclusive evidence, I know, but there's all this evidence is circumstantial.
He thinks he must be right in thinking that they ask him questions, because to come all that way and leave me all these things just to sing songs to you would be a very strange behavior. Or so it seems to me. Who can tell? I can't tell.
What is strange behavior to a strange man in a strange place? Oh,
yes.
My gosh. And then, of course, your favorite line, perhaps 6 small black ones can look like one big white one.
That's right.
At certain times.
Right.
Oh my God.
Perhaps some other people are coming to see me.
And then we see Zarniwoop knocking on the door. And Trillian says we must be in the wrong place.
Because you can't rule the universe from a shack in the middle of nowhere.
And the gentleman opens his door and says hello.
Zaphod asks, do you rule the universe?
And he says, I try not to. Are you wet?
He's like, wet? Doesn't it look as if we're wet?
Well, that's how it looks to me, but how you feel about it might be an entirely different matter.
He says, hey, if warmth makes you dry, come in.
I love that. And then Zaphod asks, what's your name? And he says, I don't know. Why? Do you think I should have one? It seems very odd to give a bundle of vague sensory perceptions a name. Yeah, they pretty much hit this whole conversation, didn't they?
Yeah. So Zarniwoop says, listen, I must ask you some questions.
And then he says, all right, you can sing to my cat if you like.
And Zaphod's like, wowee, the seat of power.
Oh, man, one in Zaphod's head is definitely bored silly.
So Zarniwoop wants to know if the cat would like him singing to it, and he's like, hey, you better ask him.
How can I tell?
Yeah. Zaphod asks, does your cat talk? It's like, I have no memory of him talking, but I'm very unreliable.
And then Zarniwoop says, how long have you been doing this? The gentleman says, this is a question about the past, is it? And Zarniwoop says, yes.
Oh, yes. And then, like, the greatest line in the whole book.
Mm-hmm. How can I tell that the past isn't a fiction designed to account for the discrepancies between my immediate physical sensations and my state of mind?
Zarniwoop wants to know if he answers all questions like this.
I say what occurs to me to say when I think I hear people say things more I cannot say.
Zaphod's like, I'll drink to that.
And he's always got a handy bottle. Oh, no, it must be the bottle of whiskey someone left him before.
Right, right. And so Zarniwoop is getting more and more and more frustrated. And he's like, now listen, people come to you in ships. He's like, I think so. And they ask you to make decisions for them about everything going on out there in the universe. Out there where?
Out there, Zarniwoop screams. And then he says, how can I tell there's anything out there? The door's closed.
So like I pointed out the first time we reviewed this scene, either in the radio show or the book, I think it was the radio show, how the man who rules the universe has the same characteristics as one of the things that they call the fair witness, who if he can't see it, it doesn't exist. So
Correct.
The door is closed and he can't see anything out there. So to him, how can there be anything out there?
And then Zarniwoop is in a fury. He says, you know there's a universe out there. You can't dodge your responsibility simply by saying it doesn't exist. And he scares the cat.
Yes. And he says that you're very sure of your facts. I couldn't trust the thinking of a man who takes the universe, if there is one, for granted. I only decide about my universe, my eyes and my ears.
And then Zarniwoop goes on, don't you know that what you decide in this shack affects the lives of millions of people?
And again, here's another great line. He says, I've never met all these people you speak of, and neither, I suspect, have you. They only exist in the words we hear.
Oh my gosh. And he goes on to say, is it folly to say you know what is happening to other people? Only they know if they exist. And that's when Trillian and Zaphod, well, Trillian gratefully waving goodbye, Zaphod with one head happy and the other head frustrated are walking out the door.
Yes, and Zarniwoop and the man who rules the universe are still having their conversation, and
he says, do you believe other people exist? And the man who rules the universe says, I have no opinion. How can I say?
And Zaphod is waving Trillian along, saying, let's go. I think the universe is in pretty good hands.
Oh, so do I. And then we're back in the shack. They're continuing to argue as Zarniwoop gets more and more upset. So Zarniwoop says, but don't you understand that people live or die on your words?
And he says, it's nothing to do with me. The Lord knows I'm not a cruel man.
Ah, the Lord. So you believe in something.
My cat. I call him the Lord. I am kind to him.
All right. How do you know he exists? How do you know he knows you to be kind to him?
I don't. It merely pleases me to behave in a certain way to what appears to be a cat.
I mean, this guy's verbal gymnastics have always been what we are totally excited about when we read, listen, and enjoy these stories. But as you and I have discovered, trying to read them in a natural fashion is harder than you think.
Yeah, so for those of you out there, each of these sentences took 3 or 4 takes.
Oh my goodness.
But you're only going to hear the last one.
That's right.
Which is probably a piecing together of the best 2.
Oh. And we're finally on the last 3 panels, and at that point, Zarniwoop understands that he's been left, so he says, where are the other 2?
And Zarniwoop's like, what other 2?
The man who rules the universe says, I remember no one. The past is a fiction to account for.
Ah, stuff it! And Zarniwoop runs outside and discovers there's no ship there waiting for him.
And his briefcase goes flying across the wet landscape.
Yes. And now we're back on prehistoric Earth, and we're on a small blue-green planet in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy.
And Ford and Arthur are trudging through what must be the fjords.
Yes.
Beautiful ice sculptures.
Yes, it's a glacier. Arthur's very unimpressed by this glacier. Ford's like, you've looked at it, but you haven't seen it.
And Arthur says, what am I supposed to be looking for?
Ford's like, you see it?
Oh, and Arthur says, oh my God.
And then there's a giant relief of Slarty Bartfast's face, not just a signature.
Right.
This would be on every news program in the world if this got discovered on a glacier somewhere.
Well, fortunately, it is a glacier after all, and it's melting into the ocean.
Yes, that part of the glacier has broken off or melted long ago.
Long since melted away, yep. And Arthur points out that it's Slarty Bartfast, and for some reason, Ford decides they ought to tell the Golga Frenchums.
I don't know why he thinks he needs to tell them anything.
I know. We don't get to see the scene of him bashing a deer.
No. Or stretching a giraffe.
Uh-huh.
So it seems it took them months to get from that glacier back to the Golga Frenchums.
Mm-hmm. And there's our captain sitting in a, I don't know, clay bath.
Yeah. Well, it looks like it's... Well, it looks like clay in the top one. Mm-hmm. It looks like rock in the middle one. And it looks like carved out lava.
That's exactly what I was thinking in the bottom, Yeah. Oh, my gosh, that's funny.
He's asking about all the progress of things that have been going on. And scouts have had no luck locating a hot spring. Or the mines.
Mm-hmm. Oh, my gosh. And then in the bottom panel, there's all bunches of people all in their sweatsuits, many of them stuffed with leaves. There's a gentleman using his finger to hold up another gentleman. He's got a mask on. He's pointing his finger at him like a gun. The guy's got his hands up in the air.
Yeah, robbing him.
Right, he's robbing him of his leaves, and number two is behind him with a stick, about to whack the guy.
Yeah. But my favorite part of this panel is in front of Ford and Arthur is a woman in a half shirt with her hair all in rollers. Mm-hmm. Because over on the bottom right corner is the hairdresser who's doing everybody's hair.
Oh, yes. And then these fancily coiffured men and women are sitting down in the corner playing what looks like cards.
Yes. Don't know where they got the cards. Oh, they're probably on the ship.
There you go. Every ship has their own cards.
Yes. Every useless bloody loony has a deck of cards.
Oh, gosh.
They're probably playing euchre.
Uh-huh. We love it. Ladies and gentlemen and sentient beings across the known universe, we interrupt this program to bring you breaking news. We understand that our local reporter, Sheila of Sheila's Ear, is on site. Sheila, what can you tell me about what's happening?
Thank you, Elmer. This is Sheila of Sheila's Ear. What I currently understand is those two blundering idiots that record the podcast, Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea, have gotten to the 42nd second of their 42nd broadcast and have failed to introduce the significance of the number 42 to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I am not currently sure how this huge oversight has occurred, how these two could bring justice to Douglas Adams' work without recognizing 42 is beyond my current understanding. I believe it may have created a temporal rift in the universe. I believe they may attempt some form of reverse temporal engineering to correct their error. Tune in to the next episode of Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea to learn if their atrocious misstep has been rectified. Back to you, Elmer.
Thank you, Sheila, for that insightful reporting. We now return to your regularly scheduled program. My gosh, I love this scene. The next scene, we've got from the backside of the captain. He's addressing the crowd, and in the front part of the crowd are these crazily coiffured individuals.
That's yes. And we get to see all his back fat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then Arthur and Ford return.
And the captain asks if they got any matches.
Matches? Instead, we bring you news, says Ford.
Captain says, pity, we've run out of matches. So he's not had a hot bath in weeks. So that's why he's had people looking for the hot springs.
And then Ford says, I bring you news of a discovery that might interest you. And then a gentleman in a suit says, is it on the agenda?
He's like, oh, come on.
I'm sorry, but speaking as a management consultant of many years standing, I must insist on the importance of observing the committee structure.
And Ford looks at this woman who's trying to cut his hair and says, he's mad, you know. This is a prehistoric planet.
Oh, I love the pictures of Ford with his multicolored beard.
Yes.
And his wild hair all slicked back. And then the captain says, I would like to call to order the 573rd meeting of the Colonization Committee of Fiddle Woodlewicks. Oh my gosh.
Ford is saying, this is futile. 573 committee meetings and you haven't even discovered fire yet.
And the young lady says, well, if you examine the agenda, you will see that we're having a report from the Hairdressers Fire Development Subcommittee today.
And then there's a hairdresser going, oh, are we? Like, whew.
I'm totally prepared for that meeting.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And he's got one eye closed shooting daggers at the woman.
Yeah, there's literal daggers out of his eyes.
And she said that they gave her a couple of sticks and she made some curling tongs.
And everybody in the background's clapping and they're all excited. And then, of course, Ford is arguing with the lady from marketing about what's required in research. And Ford tells her, you know, why don't you go stick it up your nose? And she says, well, precisely. We need to know, do people want fire that can be fitted nasally? One of my favorite lines.
And then the captain is saying, tell him about this wheel thingy. It sounds like a terribly interesting project.
Well, we're having a little difficulty there, she says.
And Ford is like, difficulty? What do you mean? The wheel is the single simplest machine in the entire universe.
And she says, all right, wise guy, if you're so clever, tell us what color it should be.
He's like, almighty Zarquan. He's regretting coming back, I'm sure.
Well, I believe this is when he decides that it was a bad idea.
Yes.
Then our buddy is back. Number 2, yay!
Yes. Captain wants to know if he found any hot springs.
No, sir. Well, we've discovered another continent to the east and declared war on it.
Ford saying, you've declared war on the next continent?
Yes, total warfare. The war to end all wars.
But there's no one even living there yet.
We've blown up numerous military installations, sir.
Military installations, number 2?
Well, potential military installations. Trees, sir. And we interrogated a gazelle.
Of course.
And the gentlemen are all excited, so they've carried off number 2 on their shoulders.
Yes. Ford wants to know, what else have you done?
And our young marketing executive says, we've started a culture. One of our film producers is making a fascinating documentary about the cavemen.
Ford's like, they're not cavemen.
They look like cavemen to me.
They live in huts.
Perhaps they're having their caves redecorated.
Very funny, but have you noticed that they're dying out? Have you any idea what that means?
Don't sell them any life insurance?
Right.
Oh my gosh. And then the documentarian is stuffed full of leaves with his camera on his shoulder.
Right. He is overstuffed with his leaves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the woman is saying that the fact that the cavemen are dying out comes across very well in this film. And he wants to make the next one about his captain. His angle is the burden of responsibility, the loneliness of command.
And don't we all love this line?
Yes, we do.
The captain says, well, I wouldn't stress that angle. You know, one's never alone with a rubber duck.
Oh.
Oh.
I can just imagine him writing this and just laughing and laughing and laughing.
Who was sitting in the bathtub with his rubber duck writing.
Right.
Oh.
So the captain wants to move along onto the subject of fiscal policy.
And then Ford's outraged once again. Fiscal policy? How can you have money if none of you produce anything? It's not like it grows on trees, you know.
He's like, but since we decided a few weeks ago to adopt the leaf as legal tender, we've all become immensely rich. Then an accountant runs in.
The accountant. Yes, the accountant and executive says, we've run into a small inflation problem on account of the high level of leaf availability, which means, of course, that the current rate has something like 3 deciduous forests buying 1 ship's peanut.
So in order to obviate this problem and revalue the leaf, we're about to embark on a massive defoliation campaign and burn down all the forests.
And he says, I think you'll agree it's a sensible move under the circumstances. And then Ford, from a distance, yelling to the massive crowd,
You're mad! You're a bunch of raving loonies! As the original prehistoric inhabitants are standing on the rocks watching this fiasco unfold below them.
Mm-hmm.
And then this always cracked me up, because this one woman gets very indignant and she's like, well, what have you and the other interloper been doing since the day we arrived?
And then Ford says, we've been on a journey to find out about this planet.
Doesn't sound productive to me.
Nope. Well, I've got news for you. We've discovered this planet's future, and it doesn't matter a pair of fetid dingo's kidneys what you lot choose to do from now on. Burn down the forest, anything. It won't make a scrap of difference. Your future history has already happened. You've got 2 million years, and that's it.
And burning down the forest, don't do that, because we got Frankenstein here in that picture.
Yeah, Frankenstein and Eddie Munster.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's funny. Definitely looks like Frankenstein.
And Eddie Munster. And we've got Geisha. And we've got Elvis.
Yep, Elvis. Elvis and the Geisha. What an interesting crowd.
And Ford is saying, at the end of that time, your race will be dead and gone, and good riddance. Just remember that. 2 million years.
And in the background, there's a huge fire blazing, and people hoarding their leaves, trying to protect their wealth.
Yes.
And of course, the captain's worried about what happened to his sponge.
Right. I've dropped it over the side. Can somebody pass it up?
Oh my gosh.
And so here's where Arthur is trying to teach the prehistoric people to play Scrabble. And he's like, no, look, Q scores 10, you see, and it's on a triple word score. Please put that down and we'll start again. He's smashing the board with a bone.
And then Ford says, what are you doing, Arthur?
Trying to teach the cavemen Scrabble.
They're not cavemen.
They look like cavemen.
Ford says, what are you trying to achieve anyway?
We've got to encourage them to evolve, to develop. Can you imagine what a world would be like descended from these cretins we arrived with?
And Ford says, we don't have to imagine it. We've seen it.
Did you tell them what we discovered? Norway? Sardi Bartfast signature? Did you tell them?
What's the point? What would it mean to them?
It means that this planet is Earth, my home, where I was born.
Why don't you go and tell that to the Gogafrinchums? Go up to them and say, in 2 million years from now, I'll be born just a few miles from here. They'll chase you up a tree and set fire to it. Oh my gosh.
Then Ford is saying, face it, Arthur, those Zeebs over there are your ancestors, not these poor creatures. Put away the Scrabble. It won't save the human race because this lot aren't going to become the human race. The human race is currently sitting on a rock on the other side of this hill making documentaries about themselves.
And Arthur says, isn't there something we can do?
He's like, nope, nothing. Like it or leave it, the Gulgafrinchams are the people you're descended from. In 2 million years, they get destroyed by Vogons. Funny old thing life, isn't it?
And then Arthur says, poor bloody caveman, it's been a bit of a waste of time for you then, hasn't it? Out-evolved by a bunch of telephone sanitizers.
And Ford is saying, I think he wants you to Scrabble with him.
Probably spelled Gnurskrinir again.
And the caveman is still trying to get his attention.
Mm-hmm. And on the board, you can see the word 42.
And Ford says, did that say what I thought it said?
Yes, Arthur says, 42, but what does it mean?
42 is the number Deep Thought gave as being the ultimate answer. And the Earth is the computer Deep Thought designed and built to calculate the question to the ultimate answer.
The next page, and they're pondering their Scrabble cubes. They discuss the fact that this has cocked everything up, and Ford still has his book, although it's quite a bit smaller than it used to be.
Yeah, yes it is.
Now it's a handheld device that fits within the palm of his hand. And Ford wonders if there's any way that they could randomize an element and see if there was any result from that random result.
Like letters in a Scrabble bag. It's nonsense, but we'll do it. Brilliant nonsense. And so they start drawing letters out of the bag, which it never really tied into me before, but the caveman playing Scrabble and putting 42 on the board and drawing letters out of a bag is similar to an infinite number of monkeys on an infinite number of typewriters.
That's correct.
Except you just happen to have the one that did it right.
Uh-huh.
So as they're pulling the Scrabble letters out, they are spelling, what do you...
Keep going, Arthur, says Ford.
What do you get if you multiply 6 by 9? Ford's like, come on, where's the next one?
That's the lot. That's all there are.
You mean that's it? That's all there is? 6 by 9? 42?
That's it. That's all. That's it.
And there's like a long shot of Earth, and it's supposed to look like Ford and Arthur are talking from somewhere, but it's the middle of the ocean.
Although England happens to be in the background this time. It's not shot of the United States.
Right. But you would think that this box would point to a landmass of where they're speaking.
Yep, you would. That would make sense. I mean, all they had to do was move it a couple of inches.
Yes.
And then they're floating back and they see the words 42 scrawled at the bottom says, the end.
So that's the ultimate question to the ultimate answer. What do you get when you multiply 6 by 9? Well, we're going to figure all that out if you listened to our special message earlier this episode.
Was there a special message earlier this episode?
Unless you let me down, there was a special message.
Oh my
this episode.
Oh no! Did that happen?
Yes, there was a special message this episode.
Are you suggesting that reverse temporal engineering is something that actually exists?
Reverse temporal engineering definitely exists.
Well, we begin with the end in mind, and we start from there.
Exactly. That's exactly how it works.
Aren't we going to finish the last few pages here?
Yes, let's finish the last couple of pages.
On here we have another drawing study that shows Vogons. It shows Zaphod on hot black stunt ship. It shows Ford and Arthur with a copy of the guide in his hands. Again, smaller than they describe it.
Yep.
A lovely picture of Marvin. Seems quite content in that image.
A lovelier picture of Trillian.
Mm-hmm. And then Slarty here down at the bottom. I like that picture of Slarty. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So this is a bunch of panels of Steve Leialoha's original character studies for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Nice. So this must be what he presented to them when they said, so what are these characters going to look like? And
right.
He gave them all the ideas.
Right. And these are far more detail in these images than most of the pages in the book.
Yes.
to this point, anyway. I mean, the original copies, the first few books seem to be much more detailed and much more consistent.
And I would imagine that the original character studies are extremely detailed to help the final art be reduced to what it needs to be. So you can't start with something real basic and get more basic. So you got to start with something really detailed so they know what to pick and choose to accurately depict each character.
Yep. I definitely like this page. Then we're back to the bio pages for all of those individuals involved with the creation of this comic.
Yep, and they still didn't catch that Shepard's name was misspelled, and he's still Hedrix back here. 3 issues in a row.
Oh, very nice.
So this, what did I used to call it? The editorial page. So this is all of the executives involved in producing the book. And then at the end, we do have the cover, the back cover.
And here it says, when Ford Prefect and Arthur Dent materialize on the Gogafrincham spaceship, their troubles are only beginning. They are stuck with a totally useless third of a planetary population on a ship that is following a preset collision course to no one knows where.
What is the secret of the planet they land on? Why does a primitive caveman seem to know the answer to life, the universe, and everything? Find out in this senses-numbing conclusion to the restaurant at the end of the universe.
It's funny this is on the back cover and this is representative of the story within.
This is like the inner flap of the dust jacket, which is of a regular book. It's what gets you to buy the 3rd issue
obviously,
of a series.
Yep. Fantastic.
Yes. So even though they do have a 3-issue version of Life, the Universe, and Everything, we're going to skip a month, and we are going to do next month a whole deep dive into the number 42 and many of the theories and ideas that we have and have come across in all of our rabbit hole falling.
It's so funny because I've been thinking about this episode since we started this podcast.
Yep.
And I'm sure that there are many people who have thought, why haven't they mentioned 42? Why haven't they dug into that number and talked about these theories and these ideas? But as you say, we have a plan. And
there could be a group of people going, I am so glad that they're not just beating to death the number 42.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm really eager to have our conversation and record that podcast because I think it's going to have a different spin than some might think.
I hope so. We will try to keep it entertaining. So now that everybody knows what's coming up next... So say goodnight,
Jeff.
Wait. Not this
again?
Thank you for listening to Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea. Look for us the first Thursday of every month for a full episode. We will also release a bonus episode later in the month. A very special thanks goes out to Luke, Max, Greg, and Tim Lesnick for arranging and performing our opening theme. We would also like to thank our talented friends and family for their voice work on our introductions and commercials. Visit our website at digitalwatchesareaprettyneatidea.buzzsprout.com, where you can find links to all my Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy inspired t-shirt designs. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube as Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea, on Instagram as Watches Idea Podcast, and on Twitter at Watches Idea. If you'd like to contact us, Our email is digitalwatchespodcast@gmail.com.
This has been a Froods for Thought production.